The first thing I noticed was the silence. It was the kind of heavy, deliberate quiet that settles in a house when one person is trying to be invisible and the other is pretending not to notice. Leo was in the living room, the muted glow of the television flickering across his face. I was in our bedroom, standing before the antique wooden box on our dresser, our anniversary box. We'd bought it on our honeymoon, a little hand-carved thing with interlocking leaves etched into the lid. For 10 years, it had been our ritual. Every Friday, we'd both drop whatever cash we had left over into the slot. It was for Italy. A month-long trip for our 10th anniversary. Our dream. I ran my fingers over the carved leaves. The wood was cool and smooth. I lifted the lid. It was empty. My breath caught in my throat. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, bloomed in my chest. It was impossible. There should have been thousands in there. We'd counted it just a few months ago, laughing as we stacked the worn bills on the bed. My heart started to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. Maybe he moved it. Maybe he put it in the bank for safekeeping. That had to be it. I walked into the living room, my footsteps unnaturally loud on the hardwood floor. Leo didn't look up from the screen. "Hey," he murmured, his eyes fixed on some mindless reality show. "Leo," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "The anniversary box. It's empty." He finally turned his head, his expression blank. "Oh, yeah, I moved it." Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. "You moved it to the bank." "Something like that," he said, turning back to the TV. "Safer there." But his shoulders were tense. He was holding his breath. I knew that tell. I'd seen it 100 times over the years when he was trying to hide a surprise birthday gift or a small, harmless fib. This didn't feel harmless. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for him to say more. He didn't. The canned laughter from the television filled the space between us. Something was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, the same sound that had soothed me for a decade. Now it felt foreign, like the breathing of a stranger. I thought about the box. I pictured the worn bills, each one a tiny monument to a shared promise. A dinner we skipped, a new pair of shoes I decided against, a weekend trip he gave up with his friends. All of it collected. Tangible. Where was it? The next morning, while he was in the shower, I did something I had never done before. I went through his wallet. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely pull out the cards. And there it was. Tucked behind his driver's license was a folded receipt, a jewelry store. One of those impossibly expensive ones downtown that I had only ever window shopped at. The date was from last Tuesday, the day he'd supposedly been working late. My eyes scanned down to the total. It was an obscene number, a number that was sickeningly, precisely familiar. It was the exact amount we'd counted out on the bed, to the dollar. My vision swam. I had to brace myself against the dresser. He hadn't moved the money, he had spent it. The sound of the shower stopped. I quickly folded the receipt, shoved it back into his wallet, and placed it on the nightstand just as he'd left it. My movements were robotic, detached. It felt like I was watching someone else, some poor woman in a movie whose world was about to end. He walked out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist, humming. He smiled when he saw me. "Morning," he said, his voice bright. I looked at his face, the face I had woken up to for 3650 mornings, and for the first time I saw a stranger. "You lied to me," I said. My voice was a whisper. His smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" I just stared at him. I didn't need to say more. He knew. The color drained from his face. He sat on the edge of the bed, the towel falling loose. He wouldn't look at me. "Maria," he started. "It's not what you think." It was the oldest line in the world, the most pathetic, and it broke something inside me. "What is it then, Leo?" I asked, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. "Did you buy a very, very safe investment from a jewelry store?" Silence hung between us. The air grew thick, suffocating. He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "I messed up, okay? I messed up badly." That was it, no explanation. No details, just a bland admission, as if he'd spilled coffee on the carpet. "You spent our anniversary money," I said, the words feeling like shards of glass in my mouth. "Our Italy money." "I can get it back," he said quickly, desperately. "I'll work extra shifts. I'll sell the watch my dad gave me. We'll get it back, I promise." But he was missing the point so completely. It was breathtaking. "It wasn't just money, Leo. My voice trembled and I hated it. It was 10 years, it was us. He dropped his head into his hands and a sob escaped him. A theatrical, self-pitying sound. He was crying for himself. For being caught. I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness where my love for him used to be. That's when I realized the betrayal wasn't just about the money, or even the affair that was now an undeniable certainty. It was about the ease with which he had erased our shared dream. He had taken 10 years of hope and traded it for a secret. The days that followed were a blur of hollow apologies and suffocating tension. Leo tried to fix it. He bought me flowers, which wilted on the counter, untouched. He cooked my favorite dinner, which I couldn't bring myself to eat. He kept saying, "I'm sorry," but the words were empty. They were apologies for the consequences, not for the act itself. He never explained who she was. He never talked about the jewelry. He treated the whole thing like a stain that could be scrubbed out with enough effort. He didn't understand that he hadn't just stained the marriage, he had shattered its very foundation. I started sleeping in the guest room. The bed felt enormous, cold. I'd lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last few months. The late nights, the work dinners. The way he'd started guarding his phone like it held state secrets. I had been so blind, so trusting. The shame was a physical weight. I felt foolish, naive. How could I have been married to a man for a decade and not know him at all? I tried talking to my sister, Clara. She listened patiently on the phone as I explained, my voice cracking. "He did what?" she gasped. "The Italy fund? Oh, honey. I'm so sorry." But then came the advice. "You two have been through so much together. Don't let one stupid mistake ruin everything. People have affairs. They work through it." One stupid mistake, she didn't get it. Nobody did. It wasn't just an affair. He had taken a symbol of our entire life together and used it to fund a dalliance. He had desecrated something sacred. I felt utterly, completely alone. My world had shrunk to the four walls of our house, a house that no longer felt like a home. Every object held a memory that was now tainted. The couch where we'd cuddled and watched movies. The kitchen where we danced while cooking. The photos on the wall of a smiling, happy couple who were a complete fiction. I was a ghost in my own life. A week after the discovery, Leo's mother called. My stomach clenched. She had always treated me more like a competitor for her son's affection than a daughter-in-law. "Maria, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Leo told me there's been some trouble." I stayed silent. "I just want you to know," she continued, "that all men have their moments of weakness. It's the wife's job to be forgiving, to be the bigger person. A strong marriage can withstand these little bumps." A little bump. He stole 10 years of savings to buy jewelry for his mistress, and she called it a little bump. "Thank you for your call," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I have to go." I hung up before she could reply. I leaned my head against the cool kitchen wall and closed my eyes. The isolation was absolute. It was a physical thing, wrapping around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. It wasn't just that Leo had betrayed me. It felt like the world had betrayed me, with its chorus of forgive and forget, its casual dismissal of a pain so profound it had hollowed me out. They saw a cheating husband. I saw a thief who had stolen my past. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the dresser again, staring at the empty wooden box. I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. I traced the interlocking leaves that we had once joked represented the two of us, woven together. Now they just looked like a tangled mess. I remembered the day we bought it. We were in a tiny, sun-drenched shop on a cobblestone street. We were young, sunburnt, and so ridiculously in love. "For our future adventures," he had said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. The memory was so vivid, so painful, it felt like a fresh wound. Leo walked into the room then, startling me. He saw the box in my hands. His face softened with a practiced look of remorse. "Maria, please, don't dwell on it. It was just money. We can make more money. We can start over." He reached for my hand. I pulled away. He still didn't see it. He never would. To him, it was just a financial loss, a temporary setback. He couldn't grasp the symbolic violence of his actions. He couldn't understand that what he had spent wasn't cash, it was time. It was faith. It was the future we had been building, one crumpled bill at a time. He looked at the empty box and saw wood and air. I looked at it and saw a tomb. He let out a frustrated sigh. "I'm trying here, Maria. I'm apologizing. I'm doing everything I can. What more do you want from me? The question hung in the air, so full of his own self-pity that there was no room left for my pain. He wanted absolution. He wanted me to sweep it all under the rug so he could stop feeling guilty. He wanted to go back to the way things were, but that was impossible. The man I had married wouldn't have been capable of this. Therefore, the man I married no longer existed, and the woman who had loved him was gone, too. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The frantic grief and the hot shame began to recede, replaced by something colder, sharper. It was clarity. He saw the shift in my eyes. "What is it?" he asked, a flicker of genuine fear in his voice. I placed the wooden box back on the dresser, my movements slow and deliberate. "You're right," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It's not about the money." He looked relieved for a split second, thinking he had finally broken through to me. I met his gaze in the mirror. "It's about the fact that you thought it was." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept. It wasn't a deep or restful sleep, but it was a quiet one. The chaotic storm inside me had finally passed, leaving behind a stark, clear landscape. The next few weeks were a strange dance of avoidance. Leo acted as if my quietness was a sign of healing, of my slow journey towards forgiveness. He would try to make small talk, to bring up old inside jokes. He was trying to rebuild the bridge he had burned, but he was using rotten wood. I would just nod or give a small, non-committal smile. Inside, I was a silent observer. I watched him. I studied him. I saw the way his thumb would nervously swipe across his phone screen. I noticed the faint, lingering scent of a perfume that wasn't mine on his jacket when he came home late. He hadn't stopped. He was just being more careful. The realization didn't even hurt anymore. It was just a fact. Like the sky being blue or the floor being solid beneath my feet. Leo was a liar. It was part of his nature. My love had died, and in its place, something else was beginning to grow. It wasn't hatred. It was a cold, hard resolve. I stopped thinking about the woman. She was irrelevant. A symptom, not the disease. The disease was Leo. His selfishness. His profound disrespect for me, for our life, for the promises he had made. I started thinking about the future. My future, without him. The thought was terrifying, but it was also liberating. It was a blank page. I spent my days going through the motions. I went to work, I paid the bills, I cleaned the house, but my mind was elsewhere. It was methodically taking inventory of our life together. The joint bank accounts, the mortgage, the assets we had accumulated over 10 years. I was no longer a wife grieving her marriage. I was a strategist. One evening, I was sorting through old paperwork in the study, looking for our tax returns. I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years, and there, at the bottom, was a small, velvet-lined box. Inside was the engagement ring he had given me. I hadn't worn it in years, preferring the simple wedding band on my finger. I took it out. The diamond was modest, but it had sparkled so brightly on the day he proposed. He had slipped it on my finger and promised me a lifetime of honesty and partnership. Another broken promise. I closed the box and put it back. It was just a thing, a piece of carbon. Its sentimental value had evaporated. My own wedding band felt heavy on my finger. A shackle. I slipped it off and placed it next to the empty anniversary box on the dresser. They looked like two sad, abandoned monuments, a beginning and an end. Leo came home late that night. He walked into the bedroom and saw the ring on the dresser. His face went pale. "What's this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "It's a ring," I said simply, not looking up from the book I was pretending to read. "Maria, don't do this," he pleaded. "We can fix this, I know we can." "There is no we, Leo," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "You spent we in a jewelry store." He flinched as if I had slapped him. Good. I wanted him to feel it, just a fraction of the pain I had been living with for weeks. He sat on the bed, looking utterly defeated. For a moment, a flicker of the old pity I used to feel for him surfaced, but I pushed it down. Pity was a luxury I could no longer afford. He was a stranger who had stolen from me. And you don't feel pity for a thief. You just make sure he can't steal from you again. I realized then that my isolation had become my strength. By cutting me off from the support I thought I needed, he had forced me to rely on myself. By showing me that no one else could possibly understand the depth of his betrayal, he had freed me from needing their approval. My path forward didn't require anyone's permission. I realized he hadn't just made me alone. He had made me independent. That independence was a cold, unfamiliar country, and I was its sole inhabitant. The first thing I did was learn its language: silence. I stopped filling the empty spaces in our conversations. I let his questions hang in the air until they withered. When he'd tell a story from his day, I'd offer a simple, "I see," my voice a flat line. He mistook my silence for submission, for the slow, painful process of healing he so desperately wanted to believe in. "It's good to see you getting back to yourself," he said one evening, watching me read a book on the couch. He had no idea. I wasn't getting back to my old self, I was burying her. And in her place, a new woman was being forged, one who was patient, observant. My new life began in the dead of night. While Leo slept, his breathing a soft, oblivious rhythm in the next room, I would sit at the desk in our study, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my face. Our financial life, which I had always left for him to manage, was a labyrinth. He'd always said he was better with numbers, and I, in my trusting stupor, had been happy to let him handle it. Now I descended into that labyrinth alone. I started with the joint checking account. I printed out the last 6 months of statements, the printer whirring softly in the quiet house. With a highlighter, I began to mark every transaction I didn't recognize. The list grew. There were dinners at restaurants I'd never been to for 2 people. There were hotel charges in nearby towns, booked on weekends he was supposedly on business trips. And then there were the cash withdrawals. Dozens of them, always for the same amount. Small enough not to trigger an alert, but frequent enough to add up to a significant sum. Pocket money for his other life. Each highlighted line was a small, sharp cut. But the pain wasn't emotional anymore. It was factual. It was data. I felt like an archaeologist, carefully brushing the dirt away from a skeleton. The shape of his betrayal was becoming clearer, more detailed than I could have ever imagined. The jewelry receipt had been the skull. This was the rest of the body. One night, I found something different. A recurring monthly payment to a high-end leasing company. I didn't recognize the name. We owned our cars outright. A quick search online revealed they specialized in luxury apartments, furnished rentals. My blood ran cold. I typed the company's name and our city into the search bar. An address popped up. An upscale new development on the other side of town. The kind of place with a rooftop pool and a concierge. It was her apartment. He wasn't just buying her jewelry. He was funding her entire lifestyle with our money. The money I had earned, too. The money we were supposed to be saving for a house with a garden for our future children. I leaned back in the chair, the printout spread before me like a map of my own destruction. The scale of it was staggering. This wasn't a stupid mistake. This was a calculated, long-term deception. A second, parallel life built on a foundation of my trust. I thought of the anniversary box, sitting empty on the dresser. It was such a small, quaint symbol of theft compared to this. This was grand larceny, of a life. I didn't cry. I just folded the papers neatly, placed them in a folder labeled Finances, and hid it at the back of my closet, tucked inside an old suitcase. My secret archive of his sins. The next morning, I woke up with a singular purpose. I needed a lawyer, but lawyers cost money. Money that was being funneled into a stranger's rooftop apartment. Taking it from our joint account would be too obvious. He checked the balance obsessively, a dragon guarding a hoard he was simultaneously pilfering. My eyes fell on the dresser. The wedding band was still there, next to the empty box. But my mind went to the other box, the one in the study drawer. I walked into the study, the morning sun streaming through the window, and opened the drawer. I took out the velvet box containing my engagement ring. I opened it and looked at the diamond. It had once been a symbol of a promise, a future. Now it was just an asset. I thought about his words. It was just money. We can make more money. He was right. I put the ring in my purse. That day, I told Leo I was going to visit my sister for the afternoon. He seemed pleased, thinking it was a sign of me reaching out, of healing. "That's great, honey," he said, kissing my cheek. His lips felt like ice. "Tell Clara I say hi." I just nodded. My first stop was not my sister's house. It was a jeweler in the next town over, a place I knew he would never go. An older man with kind eyes and a magnifying loupe looked at the ring. "It's a lovely stone," he said gently. "Good clarity." He named a price. It was more than I expected. Enough for a retainer, enough to start. "I'll take it," I said, my voice not wavering. He looked at me with a touch of sympathy, probably assuming I was another heartbroken woman selling off memories. He was only half right. I wasn't just selling a memory. I was funding an insurgency. He counted out the cash, and I put it in an envelope in my purse. The absence of the ring felt lighter than its presence ever had. My next stop was a law firm. I had spent 2 nights researching, reading reviews, looking for the sharpest divorce attorney in the city. Her name was Evelyn Reed. Her picture online showed a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense expression that I found deeply comforting. Her office was on the top floor of a downtown building, with a view of the entire city. It felt a world away from the suffocating quiet of my house. Evelyn was exactly as I had imagined. She listened without interruption as I laid out the story, my voice calm and measured. I didn't cry. I just stated the facts. The empty anniversary box, the jewelry receipt, the bank statements, the apartment. When I was finished, I pushed the folder of printouts across her polished desk. She spent a few minutes looking through them, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up, her eyes meeting mine. "He's not just careless," she said. "He's arrogant." The word resonated deep within me. That's what it was. He thought he was so smart, so clever, that I would never find out. Or that, if I did, I would be too weak, too dependent to do anything about it. "You've done the hard part," Evelyn continued, tapping the folder. "You've gathered the evidence. My job is to make sure it's used effectively." She explained the process. The filings, the discovery, the division of assets. She used words like dissipation of marital funds and forensic accounting. For the first time in months, I felt like someone was speaking my language. "He spent 10 years of our savings on her," I said, my voice tight. "He spent our future. Then our goal," Evelyn said, her voice firm, "is to get your future back. And he is going to pay for it, both literally and figuratively." I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't happiness. It was power. I walked out of her office an hour later with a clear, step-by-step plan. Phase 1 was to continue as I was, to play the part of the slowly forgiving wife while Evelyn's team worked behind the scenes. We needed to gather more information, to build an airtight case before he ever saw it coming. I had become a spy in my own home. Living with Leo became a performance. Every day was a masterclass in deception, and I was the star pupil. I started to soften. I'd ask about his day and pretend to listen. I'd suggest we watch a movie together, sitting on the opposite end of the couch, a chasm of unspoken truths between us. He blossomed under this false spring. He thought he was winning me back. The relief on his face was so palpable, it was almost pathetic. "I knew we could get through this," he said one night, reaching for my hand. "We're stronger than anything." I let him hold it for a moment, my skin crawling. I smiled a small, sad smile that he interpreted as forgiveness. "One day at a time," I said softly. Inside, I was stone. I used the time to plan my exit. I opened a new bank account in my name at a different bank. I got a private mailbox to have my mail sent to. I carefully, methodically, began to untangle my life from his. With each secret step I took, I felt my self-respect returning. It came back not in a flood, but piece by piece. A new account opened. A password changed. A document copied and sent to Evelyn. Each action was a quiet declaration of independence. One Saturday, he was out for the afternoon, supposedly playing golf with friends. I knew from a quick check of our credit cards' pending transactions that he was actually at a Michelin-starred restaurant an hour away. The charge was for 2. I found myself standing in front of the dresser, looking at the empty anniversary box. For months, it had been a symbol of my pain, of his betrayal. It was a constant, nagging reminder of what I had lost. But now, looking at it, I felt something different. It was no longer just an empty box. It was a vessel. A container for all the lies, all the disrespect, all the broken promises. I had emptied my heart of him, just as he had emptied the box of our dreams. The box wasn't a symbol of my loss. It was a symbol of my potential. Of the space I now had to build something new, something that was entirely my own. I picked it up. The carved leaves no longer looked like a tangled mess. They just looked like leaves. Things that grow, that change with the seasons. I thought about Italy, the dream we had shared. The cobblestone streets, the museums, the food. It had seemed so far away, so impossible now. But was it? Maybe the dream wasn't dead. Maybe it was just deferred. Maybe I could still go to Italy. Alone. The thought was so audacious, so revolutionary it made me smile. A real, genuine smile, I could see it. Me, sitting at a small cafe in Florence, a glass of wine in my hand, the sun on my face. Free, it was a future I could build for myself. Leo came home a few hours later, smelling of wine and expensive food. He was in a good mood, buoyed by his secret afternoon. He saw me in the bedroom, packing away some of my winter clothes. "Getting a head start on spring cleaning?" he asked cheerfully. "Something like that," I replied, my voice light. "Just making space. Getting rid of things I don't need anymore." He smiled, oblivious. He thought I was talking about sweaters. I was talking about him. The weeks turned into 2 months. My secret archive grew. Evelyn's team had hired a forensic accountant who was digging deep, uncovering shell accounts and hidden credit cards I never knew existed. The web of his deceit was more complex and expensive than I had ever imagined. Every new discovery felt less like a fresh betrayal and more like another brick in the wall of my resolve. He wasn't just a man who had made a mistake. He was a con artist, and I had been his longest con. My performance as the mending wife became second nature. I was patient. I was calm. I was biding my time. I knew that the moment I showed my hand, he would start hiding assets, moving money, trying to protect himself. The element of surprise was my greatest weapon. So I waited. And while I waited, I rebuilt myself in the quiet spaces of my life. I started waking up early, before he did, to watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee. I rediscovered my love for painting, setting up a small easel in the guest room where I slept. I filled the silent house with music he hated. These were small rebellions, but they were mine. They were acts of reclaiming territory, of reminding myself who I was without him. One evening, Evelyn called me on the burner phone I had bought. "We have everything," she said. Her voice was calm, but I could hear a triumphant edge to it. The accountant found the primary source of the funds he was using for her apartment. It's an offshore investment account he set up 2 years ago using money from his inheritance. Money he told you he'd lost in a bad stock market bet. I sank onto the bed in the guest room, the phone pressed to my ear. The inheritance. His father had left it to him, and he had come to me with a long face, telling me he'd tried to invest it wisely, but it had all been wiped out. I had comforted him, told him it was only money, that we still had each other. Another lie. A huge, foundational lie. He hadn't lost it. He had hidden it. From me, so he could build his secret life. "This changes everything, Maria," Evelyn said. "This isn't just dissipation of marital assets. This is fraud." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The final shred of any lingering, subconscious doubt I might have had about what I was doing vanished. He hadn't just betrayed me in the present. He had been planning this betrayal for years. He had been actively plotting against our shared future while smiling at me over the dinner table. I ended the call with Evelyn, a cold, hard certainty settling deep in my bones. The time for waiting was over. The time for planning was done. That's when I realized the empty box wasn't a tomb for our marriage. It was the blueprint for my new life. The phone call with Evelyn was the starting gun for a race Leo didn't even know he was running. My instructions were simple, yet they felt monumental. Go home, act normal, make dinner. We would serve him the papers in the morning at the house, before he had a chance to go to the office and start shredding documents or calling his own offshore banker. Every step back into the house that evening felt deliberate, heavy. The air was the same, the light was the same, but I was different. I was a loaded weapon, the safety off. I found him in the living room, watching TV, a picture of domestic bliss. "Hey," he said, smiling his easy, oblivious smile. "How was your day?" "It was fine," I replied, my voice perfectly even. "I was thinking of making that pasta you like tonight, the one with the roasted vegetables." His face lit up. It was his favorite meal, a dish I hadn't made in months. To him, this was the ultimate olive branch. A sign that the storm had truly passed, that the sun was coming out on our marriage again. "Really?" he said, getting up and following me into the kitchen. "That's great, Maria, that's really great." He leaned against the counter as I pulled out the peppers and onions, watching me with a look of proprietary satisfaction. He thought he had weathered it all. He thought his patience and his hollow apologies had worked. He thought he had won. "You know," he began, his voice dripping with faux sincerity, I was thinking today about how far we've come. These last few months, they've been hard, the hardest of my life, but I think they made us stronger. I continued chopping the onion, the rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board the only response. Each slice was precise, controlled. I feel like we're finally getting back to us, he went on, emboldened by my silence. And I just want you to know I'll never take you for granted again. I promise. I paused, knife in hand, and looked at him. I gave him a small, sad smile, the last one I would ever have to fake. I know, I said. We ate dinner at the dining room table, another gesture he interpreted as a return to normalcy. He talked about work, about a colleague who was annoying him, about his plans for the weekend. I listened, I nodded, I asked the appropriate questions. I was an actress in the final scene of a very long, very painful play. Inside, my heart was a block of ice. I felt nothing but a cold, clear sense of purpose. I was watching a dead man talk about his future. After dinner, he fell asleep on the couch, the TV droning on. I stood over him for a moment, looking at his face in the flickering light. The face I had once loved with every fiber of my being. There was no trace of that love left, just a profound, sorrowful sense of waste. All those years. All that faith. Gone. I went into the guest room, my room, and closed the door. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, waiting for the dawn. The doorbell rang at precisely 7:30 a.m. Leo was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, still in his pajamas. He looked annoyed. "Who could that be so early?" he muttered, shuffling to the door. I remained at the kitchen counter, my hands wrapped around a cold mug. I watched. He opened the door to a man in a plain suit holding a thick manila envelope. "Leo?" the man asked. "Yes," Leo said, confused. "You've been served," the man said, holding out the envelope. Leo stared at it, then at the man, then back at the envelope. His mind was slowly processing the words. I could see the exact moment the confusion curdled into dawning horror. He didn't take the envelope. The man let it drop to the floor between them, turned, and walked away. Leo stood frozen in the open doorway, the cool morning air rushing in. He slowly bent down, his movements stiff, and picked up the envelope. He closed the door. The click of the latch was deafeningly loud in the silent house. He turned and looked at me. His face was a mask of utter shock. "Maria," he whispered, "what is this?" I met his gaze. My performance was over. My face was as calm and empty as I felt inside. "It's a divorce petition, Leo," I said, "and a court order freezing all our assets, including the ones you have offshore." The color drained from his face. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. The word, offshore, hung in the air between us, a grenade with the pin pulled. He ripped open the envelope, his hands trembling. He pulled out the thick stack of papers. His eyes scanned the first page, then the next, and the next. He saw the name of my lawyer, Evelyn Reed, a name that even he in his corporate world would recognize as formidable. He saw the exhibits, the copies of the bank statements, the lease agreement for the apartment, the report from the forensic accountant detailing the systematic transfer of his lost inheritance into a hidden account. His entire secret world, laid bare in Times New Roman, font size 12. "How," he stammered, his voice cracking, "how did you?" "You underestimated me," I said simply. "That's been your problem all along." He sank into a chair at the dining table, the papers spread out before him like the wreckage of a plane crash. His plane crash. "Maria, please," he begged, his arrogance completely shattered, replaced by raw panic. "We can talk about this. We can fix this. Don't do this." "The time for talking was months ago, Leo," I said, my voice cold and final. "You chose to lie instead, every single day." I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like victory. "My lawyer is Evelyn Reed," I continued. "From now on, you can talk to her." I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door, leaving him alone with the consequences of his actions. I could hear a muffled sob, then the sound of his fist hitting the table. It was the sound of his world ending. And mine, finally, beginning. The weeks that followed were a brutal education for Leo. His first move was to hire a team of expensive, aggressive lawyers who tried to bully and intimidate. They filed motions, they sent threatening letters. Evelyn Reed swatted them away like flies. "They're all bluster," she told me over the phone. "They have a losing hand and they know it. He's just paying them to yell for a while because it makes him feel powerful." Leo tried calling me, texting me, emailing me. Dozens of times a day. The messages swung wildly between desperate apologies, nostalgic pleading, and outright rage. Maria, you are destroying my life. Remember that trip to the mountains? We can have that back. I'm so sorry, I was a fool. Please just talk to me. You will regret this. I will leave you with nothing. I never responded. I blocked his number and set up a filter to send all his emails directly to a folder that Evelyn's team would review. His words had no power over me anymore. They were just noise. We ended up in mediation. It was a long, sterile conference room with a polished table that reflected our strained faces. Leo sat on one side with his 2 lawyers. I sat on the other with Evelyn. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the table, his jaw clenched. His lawyers started with an offer that was so insulting, it was laughable. They tried to argue that his inheritance was separate property, that the gifts to his mistress were insignificant, that I was being vindictive and emotionally unstable. Evelyn listened patiently, her hands steepled under her chin. When they were finished, she didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply slid a single, bound report across the table. This is the full report from the forensic accountant, she said, her voice calm and lethal. It details 2 years of systematic, deliberate financial fraud. It shows marital assets being funneled into a hidden offshore account to fund a second household. It's not a gift, gentlemen, it's dissipation. And it is a textbook case. She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the room. We can present this to a judge, along with a request for a criminal investigation into tax evasion and fraud. Or, she said, leaning forward slightly, we can settle this today. Your client will return every single dollar he stole from the marital estate, plus my client's legal fees. He will cede his claim to the house. And we will walk away. Silence. Leo's head snapped up. He looked at his lawyers, his eyes wide with panic. They were shuffling their papers, avoiding his gaze. They knew the game was over. He finally looked at me, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. He saw no mercy there, just a calm, resolute stranger. His shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight went out of him completely. He was a deflated balloon. He nodded once, a tiny, jerky movement. Fine, he whispered. That was it. 2 years of lies, a decade of marriage, dismantled in a single word. As we were packing up our briefcases, Leo spoke to me for the first time that day. His voice was hoarse. Was it worth it, Maria? He asked. To burn everything to the ground like this? I stopped and looked at him, the man I had shared a bed with for 10 years, a stranger. You're the one who lit the match, Leo, I said. I just chose not to burn with you. That's when I realized he hadn't just lost the house, the money, and the marriage. He had lost the story of who he was. The successful husband, the clever investor, the man who had it all. It was all a fiction, and the book was now closed. The divorce was finalized a month later. The house was sold. I moved into a small, bright apartment downtown that was all my own. I didn't take much with me. Some clothes, my books, my paintings, and the empty wooden box. It sat on the bookshelf in my new living room, a silent witness to everything that had happened. For a while, I wasn't sure what to do with it. It felt too heavy with the past to keep, but too significant to throw away. The settlement was more than fair. Evelyn had been true to her word. After paying off the legal fees and setting myself up in the new apartment, I had a substantial amount left. Enough to feel secure. Enough for a new beginning. Enough for Italy. One evening, a few months after everything was settled, I was drinking a glass of wine and looking out my window at the city lights. I felt a quiet sense of peace that had been absent for so long. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my sister, Clara. It was a link to a social media profile. I clicked on it. It was the woman, his mistress. Her profile was public. Her recent posts were a stream of vague, angry complaints. Some men are all promises and no substance. Beware of a man who builds you a castle made of sand. I scrolled through her older photos. There she was, wearing the necklace from the expensive jewelry store. There she was, sipping champagne on the balcony of the luxury apartment. A life funded by my stolen future. A life that had now vanished. I felt a brief, clinical flicker of satisfaction, then nothing. She was just another casualty of his lies, like me, but without the legal standing. I closed the page. Her fate was not my concern. My revenge was never about her. It was about justice for me. My eyes fell on the wooden box. I got up, walked over to it, and picked it up. I ran my fingers over the carved leaves. They no longer felt tangled. They felt like a map of a place I had left behind. I walked to my desk and took out the travel brochure for Italy that had been tucked away in a drawer for years. It was old and faded. I opened it to the page on Florence. I looked at the picture of the Ponte Vecchio, at the sun-drenched cafes, the dream I had shared with him, but it wasn't his dream anymore. It was mine. I took out my laptop and booked a flight. One way. I wasn't sure how long I would stay. A month, 2, as long as it felt right. The night before I left, I packed my suitcase. I didn't have much, but it was all I needed. As a final act, I took the empty anniversary box and placed it in the bottom of the closet. I closed the door on it. Its purpose was served. It had held a dream, then it had held my pain, then it had held my resolve. Now it could rest. My plane landed in Florence on a bright, sunny morning. The air smelled of espresso and history. I found my small, rented apartment near the Arno River, dropped my bags, and walked out into the city. I spent the day wandering with no destination. I got lost in the narrow cobblestone streets. I looked at the art, the architecture, the people. I felt a sense of awe and wonder that had been dormant for years. In the late afternoon, I found a small cafe in a quiet piazza. I sat at an outdoor table and ordered a glass of Chianti. The sun was warm on my face. The murmur of Italian conversation surrounded me. The wine was rich and smooth. I thought about the past year. The shock, the pain, the isolation. The long nights spent poring over bank statements. The cold fury that had fueled me. It all felt a million miles away. I thought about Leo. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't even feel pity. I felt a profound sense of detachment. He was a chapter in a book I had already finished reading. His story would continue, I supposed, but it had nothing to do with mine. He had taken our shared dream of Italy and tried to burn it. But he had only succeeded in burning away his part of it. The dream itself was still there, waiting for me. I took a sip of wine and smiled, a real smile, not for anyone else, just for me. I was alone in a foreign country with no plan, and I had never felt so free. I realized then that my revenge wasn't the moment the server handed him the papers, or the moment he broke down in the mediation room. Those were just steps along the way. My real revenge was this moment, this peace. It was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that my happiness was no longer tied to anyone else's promises. It was mine to build. It was mine to protect. Respect can't be bought or stolen. That's what I learned. It's the foundation you build inside yourself, one true decision at a time. I stopped waiting for his apology because I realized peace was mine to give myself. If this story brought you a sense of quiet clarity, please consider subscribing. There are more journeys of strength and poetic justice waiting to be shared.